Hello, and welcome to my new series, folks, where I steal the style of Steve Shives and go through a book chapter by chapter, deconstructing what's inside it. Don't worry, I am still working on the chemtrails video. It's just that this is far more interesting, so I'm doing this meantime. So today's book is going to be Chariots of the Gods by Erick von Danekin. After the intro we shall begin.
It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. I'm doing this temporarily until I get to new intro scene. It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. Now on to the main show.
Okay then. So what do we have here, folks, in this book? I'd show you a hard copy, but I don't have one, just a PDF copy on my screen here, which I'll be looking at and reading from. If you need a physical copy, I can find a book to wave around, but it won't be the right one. So, what we have here is a book from 1968 that seems to be the cornerstone of any ancient alien, ancient astronaut claim, conspiracy claim. Excuse me a second. Let me take my space age alien drink. So, there are several claims within the book. I'll be dealing in today's video with the introduction and with the first chapter. So, the introduction, folks. What is it? Well, it's a laugh, that's for sure. The first paragraph is set up to basically instill in you a distrust of what scholars say, and an insult to anyone who isn't a scholar, basically, or as learned as this person. It starts off with the introduction. It took courage to write this book, and it will take courage to read it. Because its theories and proofs do not fit into the mosaic of traditional archaeology, constructed so laboriously and firmly cemented down, scholars will call it nonsense and put it on the index of those books which are better left unmentioned. Laymen will withdraw into the snail shell of their familiar world when faced with the probability that finding out about our past will be even more mysterious and adventurous than finding out about the future. So, in that paragraph alone, we have it set up so that it seems like scholars will just dismiss this book out of hand and call it nonsense because it does not comply with their thoughts, and that people like myself, and no doubt most of you, well, instead of accepting what he says, those who don't accept it will just go on with their lives and ignore it completely because it's too much for them and they're too scared. I plan to show otherwise. I should mention, by the way, that Erick has actually admitted falsifying evidences for his claims in this book, which is quite hilarious, and we'll come to them when we come to them. In there he also states that its theories and proofs do not fit into the mosaic of traditional archaeology. I've got news for you, Erick. I mean, it's okay, I'm slightly out of date, considering you made this in 1968, but science does not require proof. Mathematics does, and alcohol does, but science does not. Science requires evidence. And you didn't make theories, you made hypotheses, or hypotheses. Hypotheses, yeah. You made several hypotheses about whatever is in this book. I've not read beyond the first chapter, so I don't know what else comes up. And there may be cameos coming in the future, depending on what's up. Okay, so he then goes on to carry on and claim that there's something inconsistent with our past. That past which lies thousands and millions of years behind us. The past teamed with unknown gods who visited the primeval Earth in manned spaceships. Incredible technical achievements existed in the past. There's a massive know-how which we've only partially rediscovered today. Where he gets this idea from, I don't know, but I suspect you'll wipe it with paper when it gets dirty. If there's any inconsistencies about our past, it's only because it's been recorded wrongly by archaeologists as they were discovering it again. As for thousands and millions of years behind us, not likely. Maybe thousands of years, yes, but not millions. Not for Homo sapiens sapiens, especially not for cultures, and certainly not millions. The past teamed with unknown gods, and that proves what exactly? Yes, there was religions that have died. Ooh. Apparently, I don't know where you get the manned spaceships from, but we'll no doubt find that out later on. Incredible technical achievements existed in the past. That is true. The pyramids are a major sign of that. Don't mean just the Egyptian ones, the Mayan ones as well. Stonehenge. But that doesn't mean that Mesolithic man couldn't make Stonehenge or the likes. It just means that they've done it. And he's right in his claim that we have only partially discovered how to do these things. As such, or how they were done, I should say, not how to do them, because nowadays we can do them. It goes on to say there is something inconsistent about our archaeology, because we find electric batteries many thousands of years old, because we find strange beings in perfect spacesuits with platinum fasteners, because we find numbers with 15 digits, something not registered by any computer. But how did these early men acquire this ability to create the incredible things? Well, again we find inconsistencies in what he says. Electric batteries many thousands of years old? I don't think so. We want evidence of these things, Eric. Strange beings in perfect spacesuits with platinum fasteners? Again, evidence. Why have we never seen these? In fact, it goes on to admit later on in the first chapter that we don't have these beings in museums to see. We don't have any of these beings, so how can you make that claim on your introduction but then dismiss it in the next one? As we'll see. And numbers with 15 digits is easy, and that is if he comes up with it in the chapters, then that is definitely going to be something that you'll be seeing a cameo on. Ah dear. And how did early man acquire the ability to create these incredible things? The same way we've always acquired the ability to create them. Our brains. We've managed to acquire the ability of flight. However did we do that? Simple. We worked it out. Ah dear. But no, an ancestral man was just too stupid to do anything. Of course, he goes on to say there's something inconsistent about our religion. Don't even get me started on that one, folks. But a feature common to every religion is that it promises help and salvation to mankind. Most religions maybe, but not all. The primitive gods gave such promises too. Why didn't they keep them? Well, because they're false. As an atheist, I obviously say that. They don't tend to exist. There's no evidence for these gods ever existing. So the next one is rather odd. Why did they use ultra-modern weapons on primitive peoples? Evidence, Eric! And why do they plan to destroy them? Again, evidence, please. Let us get used to the idea that the world of ideas, which has grown up over millennia, is going to collapse. A few years' accurate research has already brought down the mental edifice in which we have made ourselves at home. Knowledge that was hidden in the libraries of secret societies is being rediscovered. What secret societies? What knowledge is being rediscovered from these secret societies? The age of space travel is no longer an age of secrets. It never was an age of secrets, because we haven't actually started in the age of space travel yet. We can get into space, and that's about it. Which aspires to suns and stars. Suns and stars are the same thing, Eric. And also plumbs the abysses of our past for us. Gods and priests, kings and heroes emerge from the dark chasms. We must challenge them to deliver up their secrets, for we have the means to find out all about our past. without leaving any gaps if we really want to. No, we don't. We will always have gaps in our ancestral history because we weren't there to know. We can work out how things were done, or we can make hypotheses about what the past was like, or if we have written records and we can actually state what it is. But without actual records from the time, by the people that were making them at the time, then it's all just guesses unless we have evidence stating otherwise. The next couple of sentences are amazing for him to include in this book alone. Modern laboratories must take over the work of archaeological research. Even in the late 1960s, laboratories were doing a fair amount of archaeological research. But we can't just have them do all of it. I mean, who's going to go out into the field? A laboratory is not going to get anything to do. Not going to do anything if you can't get any work, anything to work with. Which, you know, you can't unless you do actual archaeological research. Archaeologists must visit the devastated sites of the past with ultra-sensitive measuring apparatus. You know, like we do when you're an archaeologist. What is this doing in the book? I don't know. Priests who seek the truth again begin to doubt everything that is established. Priests who seek the truth must again begin to doubt everything that is established. Doubt is not something generally known for those in a religious caste. If you have doubt, you shouldn't be a priest really, should you? Faith does not involve doubt. And priests can seek truth all they want, as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't mean I'll accept what they consider truth, unless they have evidence for it. The gods of the dim past have left countless traces that we can read and decipher today for the first time because of the problem with space travel. Sorry, the grammar's terrible here. The gods of the dim past have left countless traces which we can read and decipher today for the first time because the problem with space travel, so topical today, was not a problem, but a reality to the men of thousands of years ago. Evidence! For I claim that our forefathers received visits from the universe in the remote past, even though I do not yet know who these extraterrestrial intelligences were or from which planet they came. I nevertheless proclaim that these strangers annihilated part of mankind existing at the time and produced a new and perhaps first Homo sapiens. Perhaps the first Homo sapiens. So not only is he claiming that mankind is Homo sapiens, which it's not, that's the species, we're a subspecies, Homo sapiens sapien, but strangers from another world created Homo sapiens. We'll get to his evidences eventually. The first chapter sadly does not deal with evidence. The assertion is revolutionary. It shatters the base on which a mental edifice that seemed to be so perfect was constructed. It is my aim to try to provide proof of this assertion. It's not proof we need, it's evidence. My book would not have been written without the encouragement and collaboration of many people, blah 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 blah. He goes on to name stuff that he's thanking, like his wife and the folks at NASA for showing him around some stuff. Pretty much normal introduction stuff. So we can ignore it there. So that's the end of the introduction. It doesn't exactly give me confidence for how this book will go. Alright, so chapter 1. Are there intelligent beings in the cosmos? Very possibly, Eric. Is it conceivable that we world citizens of the 20th century are not the only living beings of our kind in the cosmos? Remember, this was written in the 20th century, so that's why he's put it down there. Yes, it's entirely conceivable. That's about all I can say. Because there is no homunculus from another star on display in a museum for us to visit, the answer, our Earth is the only star with human beings, still seems legitimate and convincing. No, it doesn't. Convergent evolution does not make a species the same. If by some strange coincidence there was a species from another planet with morphological similarities to us, to make people think that they were human beings, they still would not be Homo sapiens sapiens. That's not how evolution works. Star Trek got that one wrong, you know. And the claim our Earth is the only star with human beings, a planet is not a star. A planet is a planet. A star is a star. Planets rotate around stars. Stars are suns. Are you getting this, Eric? Dear. And no one states that our Earth is the only star with human beings. I think you mean our only planet with life, which no one states. So, already we have a straw man of him claiming something, that, stating that something is, that people are saying this and building it up to attack it, when that's not what people are saying. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what a straw man is, I'll leave a link below to a list of logical fallacies for you. So, on a clear night, the naked eye can see about 4,500 stars, so the astronomers say. The telescope of even a small observatory makes nearly 2 million stars visible, and a modern reflecting telescope brings the light from the thousands of millions more viewer specks of light in the Milky Way. Prepare for this one. But in the colossal dimensions of the cosmos, our stellar system is only a tiny part of an incomparably larger stellar system of a cluster of Milky Ways. I think he means spiral galaxies. Because there's only one Milky Way galaxy, and we're in it. One might say containing some 20 galaxies within a radius of 1.5 million light years. And he goes on to say what the light year is, you know, the distance travelled by light in a year. And he gives a mathematical equation for it. And even this vast number of stars is small in comparison with the many thousands of spiral nebulae disclosed by the electronic telescope. Disclosed up to the present day, I should emphasise, for research of this kind is only just beginning. And he's right there, it is just beginning. But, can someone tell me how many galaxies are close together at 1.5 light years? Because the nearest galaxy that we've discovered to the Milky Way is, I think it's 4.2 light years away, or is that just Andromeda, which is not the closest? Or is it 3.5 to 4.5 light years away from us? And it's a dwarf cluster. It's not a spiral one, that's for sure. Andromeda is the next largest that we have to us, I believe. That's 7 light years away, moving closer every day. It's unlikely you'll find. And by larger stellar system, I presume he means the universe, which is what we are part of, and Milky Way is a part of. So, I don't know where he gets this idea from, but 1.5 million light years is pretty damn close for two galaxies to be at, let alone 20 within a radius. The amount of gravity pulling each other apart, whew, that'd be fucked. Maybe at the beginning of the universe. The astronomer Harlow Shapley estimates that there are some 10 to the power of 20 stars within the range of our telescopes. When Shapley associates planetary system with only 1 in 1,000 stars, we may assume that this is a very cautious estimate. And he goes on to say that a whole heap of math, which basically comes up to saying that the likelihood of there being life on another planet is, even though it is small in a cosmological scale, is likely to the degree of 1 in every 1,000 stars or something, every 100 million planets, which could have life existing, which is very possible. Unlikely, but possible. And then he goes on to say, if we follow the hypothesis of the biochemist Dr. S. Miller, life and the conditions essential for life may have developed more quickly on some of these planets than on Earth. If we accept this daring assumption, civilizations more advanced than our own could have developed on 100,000 planets. Yes, it could have. We've just not seen any evidence for that life. Professor Dr. Willie Ley, Willie Ley may or may not have been a doctor, a PhD doctor. He was originally a paleontologist, so it suggests he did have a doctorate in paleontology, but he was never accredited with doctor, or at least half the stuff I find on YouTube about him, not YouTube, sorry, on through Google about him, don't credit him with that doctorate, and some of the stuff does. He was a well-known scientific writer, and he was a friend of Werner von Braun, as it states here. In fact, he was one of his first pupils in rocket courses that he set up when von Braun fled Germany, Nazi Germany. Apparently though, what we're getting here now is a personal anecdote, because that's evidence, right? So, Dr. Willie Ley told me in New York the estimated number of stars in our Milky Way alone amounts to 30 billion. More like 200 to 400 billion. Million actually, sorry I should say. I think. Is it? No, I think it's billion. More like 200 to 400 billion stars. Which is a hell of a lot more than 30 billion. Although the book says milliards, which is an old term for billion. The assumption that our Milky Way contains at least 18 billion planetary systems is considered admissible by present-day astronomers. Possibly. A bit more than that, I think. If we now try to reduce the figures in question as much as possible and assume that distance between planetary systems are so regulated that only in one case in 100 does a planet orbit in an ecosphere of its own sun, that still leaves 180 million planets capable of supporting life. If we further assume that only one planet in 100 that might support life actually does so, we should still have the figure of 1 to 8 million planets with life. Let us further suppose that out of every 100 planets with life, there is one on which creatures with the same level of intelligence as Homo sapiens live. Then even this last supposition gives our Milky Way the vast number of 18,000 inhabited planets. Presuming they are, of course, inhabited. And here now he says, given that since latest counts give 100 billion fixed stars in our Milky Way, probability indicates an incomparably higher figure than Professor Ley puts forward in his cautious calculation. Now you're wondering where this is going, because he keeps on going on about this, about the amount of planets for a wee while. I'm not going to go on and quote all of it. So for the next couple of pages, he pretty much goes on about how the existence of planets similar to Earth, with similar atmospheric gases, gravity, you know, float, although for some reason he thinks similar flora and fauna, which is very unlikely to be. For some reason he thinks that people are arguing that this possibility is not factual, that this possibility will never be. That's a big, huge straw man to base your chapter on. He then goes on to say, the idea that life can only flourish under terrestrial conditions has been made obsolete by research. It's a mistake to believe that life cannot exist without water and oxygen. Even on our own Earth there are forms of life that need no oxygen. Note he doesn't say water. They are called anaerobic bacteria. And he goes on to talk about how scientists seem to think that the idea that to have life in solar systems you must have the same terrestrial conditions that we have, like oxygen, water and so on. Again, a straw man, because no one's making that claim. It's just extremely likely. And he goes on to state that life forms in other planets could have grown up differently from our makeup, they might not be carbon based, and so on and so forth. And again, it's a big straw man because no one's actually claiming that one. It's just, according to what we know biologically just now, the most conceivable would be a carbon based life form, because it's the one that, a carbon oxygen based life form I should say, because that's the one that is easiest for nature to create. And as we all know, nature tends to take the easiest way, depending on conditions, for adaptation. It's that simple. If you have a pile of silicon and plenty of oxygen, or say carbon next to the silicon and plenty of oxygen in the same atmosphere, say, the same conditions, the life is more likely to form from the carbon-based molecules than from the silicon-based molecules, because the easier way, the more conceivable, and the bonds are quicker to form under carbon and oxygen than they are silicon and oxygen. Do you get what I'm saying? Anyway, so he goes on and on about this, and he mentions a couple of experiments which I can find fuck all about, except maybe one Time article on a fella, a physiologist, carried out an experiment apparently where he recreated the atmospheric conditions of Jupiter in his laboratory and bred bacteria and mites in that atmosphere, because that proves everything. Or even apparently Hinton and Bloom, Bristol University entomologists, who dried a species of midgie for several hours at a temperature of 100 degrees centigrade. Immediately after, they immersed the midgies in liquid helium, which he claims which is well known as to be as cold as space, but it can stay liquid down to up to absolutely zero, but it doesn't. Some parts of space, maybe. But it's not as cold as space for all of it. The average temperature certainly isn't. After heavy irradiation, they return the midges to their normal life, blah blah. Okay, and according to him, we also know bacteria live in volcanoes, well we do, and others that eat stone and some that produce iron. So he says the forests of question marks grow because of these experiments and stuff, and what we know about microbiology and bacteria and so on. But it's not, because no one is claiming anything about this. We know that bacterial life forms can survive in space. Their spores can survive. We've tested this for 6 years. We had our bacterial life forms outside in all sorts of conditions in space, unprotected, unprotected and such like, to find out what was the most deleterious, if bacterial spores could survive, and they did. With UV lights being the most deleterious amongst the spores, i.e. that killed the most spores. So he goes on to say that research is going on, new proofs that life is by no means bound to the prerequisites for life on our planet are constantly accumulating, which again, no one is making the argument for. He goes on to quote, or at least paraphrase, Teilhard de Chardin, the guy that was involved in Piltdown Man. Yeah, that hoax. Admittedly, his part wasn't huge in it. He just discovered the canine that caused all the pig tooth. He discovered, and it got claimed as being a canine. He never had anything else more to do with that. But he said that the philosopher said that only the fantastic has a chance of being real in the universe. Yeah, only the fantastic. You know, like. This is fantastic. This is fantastic. All fantasy-based things, you know? So, somehow we should take the word of a philosopher as absolute evidence as well. And I paraphrase at that. If our way of thinking worked the other way around, this is a claim, it would mean that intelligences on another planet took their living conditions as criterion. If they lived at temperatures of minus 150 to 200 degrees centigrade, they would think that those temperatures are which are destructive to life as we know it, are essential for life on other planets. I don't know where he gets this idea, because no one is making the claim that Earth-like atmospheres are the only atmospheres that life could grow in. It's just it's the most likely from what we know about biology. So he goes on again about saying we ought to self-suspect to be rational and objective, which would be nice, you know, in this book, but it's not. At some time or other, every daring theory seems to be a utopia, is what he says. Yeah, no. Every daring theory does not mean a utopia. Really? I mean, for fuck's sake, the nuclear bomb was hardly a fucking utopia. And you can't say that the idea of nuclear radiation and the use of nuclear industry was based on a utopian ideal because it was developed for a fucking bomb. That's the original idea behind developing nuclear energy, was for the bomb. Its uses for the good of society came afterwards. So it wasn't exactly built upon a utopian dream. He then goes on to say these examples are given here are meant to point out the most far-fetched possibilities. Just a pity he doesn't mean that for an entire book. So he then goes on to say about how the universe is estimated to be between 8 and 12 billion years old. Well, it's 13.4 as we know now, or 13.2, something like that. And he goes on about meteorites bringing traces of organic matter under our telescopes. Not that that matters, because in chemistry should say, organic matter is carbon-based matter. Apart from some forms of carbon-based matter, most of it is going to be organic. That's all it means. It doesn't mean life has been found on meteorites. It just means matter, like say carbon, has been found on it. And that's all it means. Bacteria, millions of years old, awake to new life, which is true. And bacteria can go dormant, and that's because of, excuse me, because of a molecule called dipicylinic acid. One of them. DPA. Right? It's the amount of that content of that in the spores. I'll leave a link below for you if you want to read it. Floating spores impelled by the light of the sun, traversing the universe. Yeah, UV light kind of kills most spores. It's the most deleterious element to spores that would be in space, and there are some, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't mean much. At some time or other, captured by a gravitational field of a planet, new life has gone on developing in a perpetual cycle of creation. So I guess he's a creationist, folks. For millions of years. Innumerable careful examinations of all kinds of stones in all parts of the world prove that the Earth's crust was formed out 4,000 million years ago. 4 billion. 4 billion years ago. The Earth was formed 4 billion years ago. The crust, not so much. And then he goes on to say that all that science knows is that something like man existed a million years ago. Oh dear. That's not what science states. Science states that man has evolved for millions of years. Homo sapiens sapiens, I'd have to check it up to find out, but I suspect it's a little bit more than a million years ago. Is this on straight? And apparently out of that gigantic river of time, it's only managed to dam up a tiny rivulet of 7,000 years of human history. Because of a lot of hard work, many adventurers, and a great deal of curiosity. But what are 7,000 years of human history compared with thousands of millions of years of the history of the universe? Not a lot if you look at it like that, in a time scale like that. But it's a lot to us, I guess, because we're so short-lived. What has this got to do with anything about the other life in the cosmos? What the entire chapter is about? We, the paragons of creation, took 400,000 years to reach our present state and our present stature. Again, I'd have to look it up for Homo sapiens sapiens. But we're not the paragons of creation. No one except creationists state that. Certainly scientists don't. Who can produce concrete proof to show why another planet should not have produced more favourable conditions for the development of other or similar intelligences? No one. And do you know why? Because no one's claiming that. If someone did claim it, the burden of proof would be on them. Just like the burden of proof is on you to provide evidence for your claims. In Is there any reason why we may not have competitors on another planet who are equal or superior to us? No. Are we entitled to discard this possibility? No one is. We have done so up to the present. Alright, I see it's going to continue. Are we entitled to discard this possibility? We have done so up to the present. No. What is said is that we just haven't found any yet, but we are looking. How often, what people do say though, is very unlikely that people from other planets have visited us to affect with our civilization. How often the pillars of our wisdom have crumbled into dust. Hundreds and hundreds of generations thought that the earth was flat. The iron law that the sun went round the earth held good for thousands of years. We are still convinced that our earth is the centre of everything. Are we? Are we convinced of that? I'm certainly not. Science certainly isn't. Creationists might be. Although it's been proved that the Earth is an ordinary star of insignificant size, 30,000 light years from the centre of the Milky Way. Again, he conflates planets with stars. The Earth is a planet. Sol is the star that our planet revolves around. The time has come for us to admit our insignificance by making discoveries in the infinite, unexplored cosmos. Only then shall we realise that we are nothing but ants in the vast state of the universe, and yet our future and our opportunities tie in with the universe where the gods promised they would. What gods? Provide evidence for these gods. Provide evidence for these claims, or these promises. No one... Let me just finish the chapter. Not until we have taken a look into the future shall we be strong and bold enough to investigate our past honestly and impartially. That's what archaeology is. It's exploring the past, and if something is found to be wrong through further evidence, then like science, like the normal sciences of biology, chemistry and physics, that idea gets usually put aside because new evidence has come to light, which changes the way of thinking about things that happened in our archaeological past. And my hands are waving around too much. No one at any point is claiming that life does not exist on other planets. There's one entire strongman, an entire chapter of it's just one big straw man, folks. The man can't even differentiate between a planet and a star, or the fact that the Milky Way is a spiral galaxy, but not all spiral galaxies are the Milky Way. Well folks, that was the first chapter. Sorry this video took so long. We'll see how it goes when I'm not doing an intro as well. Stay tuned for chapter 2, when our spaceship landed on Earth. Which sounds so much fun. But at least there'll be more for me to get my teeth into in that chapter, I would presume. See ya!